Hello and welcome to another episode of Couch Therapy, where I discuss some sort of cultural topic in Japan, or I take a look at the emails that I received recently and I answer some questions. I had a few emails stacking up on the same topic and one that I've never talked about before, so I thought, hey, why not dive into that? So the title of the email is Work Visas 101. That's from Russ. Thanks for subscribing and writing, Russ. I really appreciate that. Russ basically is in a situation where he's thinking of coming over and teaching, but he wants to know, what is the visa process as it compares to other places in the world? I'll read a little bit here. It says, you've made several videos now about the value of using a dispatch company to get to Japan and then to move on from that dispatch company afterwards, after a year or so. Russ then understands that the implication of that is that once you have the visa, renewing it isn't as challenging as getting it. Would you be able to clarify? Certainly I can clarify, and yeah, you have basically grasped it there. And they are a real benefit. So, like you might predict, the most difficult visa to get in Japan is the first one that you're going to get. And that stands to reason. They have lots of screening when they haven't had you in the country already. And so it requires something like a criminal record check, like lots of checking out of your educational history, things like that. Now, there's two visas that, if you're involved with education, that are going to be pertinent to you, and I'll talk about them individually. So the one that I have is the first one I'll discuss, which is the Instructor Visa. The Instructor Visa is the one that you're going to get specifically if you were to work in the public sector, which is awesome for that reason. You need that visa if you're going to work in the public sector, and that's what you want. If you were going to come over and be a jet, for example, you're going to work in the public sector, that's the sort of visa that you would have. The other visa is like a humanities and arts visa. That's for the private sector, where if you were working in something like an eikaiwa and an international school, and that kind of has its own string of benefits as well. But then the major disadvantage of that one is that you cannot work in the public sector if you have that visa. Let's talk a little bit then about renewing, like the title of this email says, the sort of 101 of this topic. So once you've been over here, it is just as simple as, when you reach that next year, if you're with the same company, you go into immigration in the morning, you apply, and within whatever period of time, you're then given a new visa. And usually these large dispatch companies have thousands of employees, they do it on the regular, they're really experienced with it, and so the process goes very quickly. Also, they're very recognizable. Say you were working for Eon, or if you're working for Interact, when that goes through the immigration office, they're like, oh, it's one of these companies, it's another teacher, bam, 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 it's all done. It's really, really straightforward. You can apply for different lengths of visas as well. I've tried in the past, I still haven't got it. It would save me a headache, but I don't really care, because it's, like I say, it's actually not that difficult to renew. But you can get like a 3-year visa, I believe as well. You can get a 5-year visa. I tried to get the 3-year last time, they still didn't give it to me, but whatever. So there's not a lot of complexity there, right? You're going to get over here, you're going to do all the busy work to begin with to get in initially, and then the following year you go into immigration and you renew once a year, or once ever, however many years that you've gotten a work visa for. The other details that I might talk about, because some people want to do additional work, say for example something different from teaching. Now that's where having an instructor visa is a bit of a bane, and having the humanities visa is a bit of a boon. Because if you have that arts and humanities visa, say for example you wanted to be ridiculously good looking and you wanted to be a part-time model. If you wanted to model in Tokyo, if you have the humanities visa, you can work at an eikaiwa, but you can also do modeling. And I mean, I use that as a rough example, but basically it allows you to do a few other bits of work, and so you could spread whatever free time you have around. Whereas if you have the one that I have, if you're working in the public sector, then you are limited to only working in your school, except for one other detail, where what you can do is, if you went to, say, a center and you volunteered to do more teaching outside of your officially sanctioned job, to do that, your employer, whatever company it is that you work at, say like your school that you're working at, can give you special permission and say, oh, this person's going to do a little bit more teaching at this location, and we don't mind that. And if you then take that to the immigration office and they say you then qualify for this additional work, it allows you to do this other stuff. And then for full disclosure, I believe as well that some people, I don't believe, I know for a fact that there are people who will do teaching on the side, say for example, private lessons with students however they've met them. Say you've met people on the PTA at your school and they said, oh, do you mind coming over and teaching my kid after school or whatever? And you could say, yeah, I'll go and do some private lessons. I've had my friend did that. He had like 3 students for a little while that he was doing in addition to whatever teaching you did at the schools. So that's another way that people make money, and you don't need to worry about your visa. I believe like Interact's official position on it, Interact being the Uber big dispatch company, is that if it's not impacting your work at the schools, then they sort of turn a blind eye to it. They're not going to really worry if you're tutoring an extra couple of students on the weekend. So you need to be cognizant of not overworking yourself, that it becomes an issue at one of your schools, but you don't need to freak out whether that would be a big deal or not. You can totally do it if you can balance it. So those are the 2 different types. These are the different things that they allow you to do to put your mind at ease, basically, if you're thinking, oh man, what's the renewal process like? Doesn't cost you any money aside from, as I said, like maybe the commute. If you've got to go into the immigration office and you live however far away, maybe you have to take a day off work, so in that way it costs you money. Oh, actually that's not totally fair. There are these stamps that go on to the application, and I believe the stamps are something like 5,000 yen, so it's like $50. It's like $50 to renew it. But what's $50, right? That's not a big deal to be able to continue in a job that you enjoy in a foreign country. And that's not much of a hoop to jump through either, because you go to the post office. A lot of these buildings where the immigration office is, there'll be a post office very nearby, so you can pick those up. And that's it really. The thing that I would recommend, if I added like a little bit more of advice to this, would be that don't wait. If you are interested in staying in the country for a longer period of time, don't wait to make this application for the longer visa length. If you do it in your second, as soon as you renew, try at least for the 3-year visa, because that's a great benefit. Because to talk about other things as well, if your visa is not connected to your employer, so for example, you've got an instructor visa, you're working in the public sector, and you discover after half a year, Interact are shitheads, or Eon are shitheads. You hate them and everything about them. You hate their asshole faces. And you want to do something different. If you quit that job, you don't lose your visa. As I say, it's not connected to them. So if you got something like a 3-year visa, then you don't need to worry about them being responsible for you for the next couple of years. You could then use that visa to hop into the next job that would take you that much further in the country, onto whatever new adventure, whatever new position you had found for yourself. So get that as quickly as possible. Don't worry about it being connected to the employer. And as well, kind of a final detail that I could talk about, like 101, switching visas. That, from what I've seen, if you're working with a reputable company and they've got some history behind them, if you want to switch, it's not going to be that big of a deal. My buddy went from being, he was crazy. Well, he's not crazy, but the whole story, the amount of times he went back and forth is kind of crazy. He was initially on the Humanities because he worked for Peppy Kids Club, which I'm sure many people watching this video are either going to work for or have worked for in the past. So that was the Arts and Humanities visa. He then worked for Interact, and so Interact switched that over to an instructor visa for him, and then he ended up working at an international school, and the international school then turned that back, and then I believe he's going to work as a direct hire pretty soon, and so he's going to get an instructor visa again. So you can as well switch, and in each one of these switches, there was not some monumental fee that had to be paid. So the fees are quite low, The bureaucracy is surprisingly minimal. The most difficult time you're going to have is at the beginning, which isn't that difficult. It's more simply time consuming. So something like between 4 and 6 months to get the whole thing, like your certificate of eligibility, that submitted for this submitted for that, and ending up with your work visa at the end of it. A little bit more advice that I would offer as well is, if I've seen this come up, a few people have emailed me, and this is shiesty. If somebody says they need the actual physical copy of your bachelor or whatever your degree, that's bullshit. Don't ever send your actual copy. I mean, at most you could send a photocopy of that and send a physical copy of your transcripts. That's fine, but never send these people. Like if they do that, the job is not worth it. You're worth more than that. And there's different places to apply to, so you don't need to do that. That was something I saw and I was like, no, that's ridiculous. So those are my thoughts on kind of Visa 101 things to worry about, mostly to put people's minds at ease who think that this might become a huge, lengthy, involved process once they're here. It gets much easier once you're actually here. So there it is. So please do, from what I hear right now, there's a big push towards interaction. So please let me know your thoughts. What are your experiences with getting visas in other countries? Obviously for Russ, it was kind of a hassle being a UK citizen working over in the US. What are your experiences with that? Please do hit that like button. I hear that interaction is huge, and obviously if you like the video, that helps me out a great deal. If you have any questions that you want answered, my email is down below, or I'll have flashed along the bottom here all my social media, and I respond to that 99% of the time, whether you get a hold of me on Twitter, on Instagram, on Snapchat, whatever else. I'm always going to respond. I really appreciate people taking the time to watch this and taking the time to get a hold of me. Flash up, I've got my ebook here if you're interested in reading some interesting psychological horror drama, Stoneheart, now available on Amazon in digital copy. I hear it's a good read. Swear by it. And I will catch you guys in the next video. Thanks for checking out this one. Peace.